you're taking the microdoses, you're actually allowing your brain and your body to be wide open for change. You're making yourself a whole new person. I'm able to be me.
From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to another expanded episode. We have another incredible explained episode today with Lacy's EMDR therapist, Katie LaRue. We had an incredible EMDR explained a few weeks back that will link in the show notes if you haven't checked it out yet. And just as a reminder for anyone, if you haven't listened into the first one, Katie is a licensed marriage and family therapist, an EMDR practitioner, certified mindfulness and meditation practitioner, has a master's degree in counseling, and is an advocate for psychedelic therapeutic treatment. So in this sort of part 2 of explained episodes with Katie, we're diving into microdosing. This is something you guys have really asked about a lot as Lacy has started to share some of her microdosing dabblings on Instagram. And it's so funny because at the time we recorded the episode, I had never microdosed before, taken any psychedelics, and I have since gotten on a protocol and have been absolutely loving it, and is such a more mild but heart-opening experience than I had initially thought. So for anyone who doesn't know what microdosing is, has no idea what I'm talking about, we will cover all of that in this episode. And one of the reasons we really wanted to talk about both EMDR and microdosing is that we're always looking for different tools, modalities, things that you can add to your tool belt that will help some of that deeper trauma unblocking, help bring our body back to homeostasis, in addition with the manifestation work. So we're always kind of on the hunt for any new thing that can help speed up the process for anyone that is going along with the manifestation work. Disclaimer, this podcast is for informational purposes only, so you need to consult with your own mental health professional or doctor before starting any microdosing protocol or taking any illicit substances out there. And a really fun announcement for anyone that might not have access to microdosing, which helps expand your consciousness. We have another way to expand in an even gentler way with a brand new Alexis Smart TBM collaborative flower remedy. So the first remedy we came out with was Unblocked, and we now have sort of the second step of the process, which is the expanded flower remedy. This is building upon that unblocking piece, and this remedy is designed to help enhance your manifestation practice by making you feel confident, magnetic, and flow. When you're expanded, it's almost as if anything's possible. So you're in trust as you dance with the universe, you surrender to the magic unfolding around you. It's a light, freeing, confident feeling to be authentically yourself. We will link our previous episode with Alexis Smart about the Unblocked remedy so you can learn a little bit more about flower remedies and how they impact the body, how to dose and take them. But we're so excited to announce this one, and it kind of seems like the perfect time. We're in spring, we're opening up to new ideas. It's kind of interesting because this week was the Neptune and Jupiter conjunction, and Jupiter is all about expansion. And so it's such this large theme this week of expansion, but also looking at all of our shadowy pieces as we expand and pull back the layers. This remedy is so profound, and I've seen such significant shifts and openness and just tapping into my authenticity on a whole nother level. So if you guys are interested in trying that, please tag us, let us know how you're liking it, and we're so excited to share. You can check that out in the link in the show notes as well.
And now, a word from our partners.
One thing I am a huge fan of is protecting and helping to heal my gut. As someone who has had many gut imbalances in her life, having a really healthy gut really is the start of health for me, because it is what sets everything else into balance. And so when it comes to my probiotics, I want to get the best in the business in order to support my gut at the maximum capacity. So I've looked no further than Seed Probiotics. We've been talking about them for such a long time because they really are top of the industry. They have the most science-backed research, the 2-in-1 capsule to make sure 100% of what you are taking in the probiotics actually reaches the gut, compared to a lot of other probiotics where it gets broken down in the stomach acid and bile and never actually reaches the part of the gut or colon that it needs to go in order to support you. And one thing that I had been thinking about recently was this idea of rotating probiotics, getting different strains of probiotics at different times. Different companies have this idea and schedule, and Seed actually had a great share on their Instagram about this that helped break down why it was important to take your probiotics regularly. Probiotics are transient, meaning they go into the digestive tract and the colon and support that area. So they're interacting with your gut cells, your immune cells, your dietary nutrients, and all of the microbiota that is already in your digestive tract, to help support all of them further. After they've done their job, they colonize that area, and then they leave your system when they travel through your intestines and out of your body. So that means if you're rotating probiotics, you're not giving all of the strains that you try in that first batch its fair share, because you need to continually take it. It's something you want to take on a regular basis. They're not permanently going to live in your system. So they're constantly moving in and out of your body. So the more regularly you take probiotics, the more effective they're going to be for your body. That's why I stick with Seed. I'm regular about taking it. And I did notice, it was interesting, when I went home over the holidays, I had left my jar of Seed at home, and I was so disappointed in trying to get one on the go, because even after not taking it for 4 or 5 days, I can tell my digestion immediately shifted and felt different, because it wasn't getting that support from the Seed probiotic that I needed. And once I was back on, I was feeling incredible, far less bloated, ease of digestion, and everything was running a lot smoother. So if you're looking for a good probiotic, you're looking to boost your immune and overall health through supporting the gut microbiome, I highly suggest checking out Seed. We have a special code for our podcast community, TBM15, for 15% off your first month subscription with Seed. I promise you, you will not regret it. It is one of the best monthly subscriptions I have by far. Again, that code is TBM15 for 15% off, and you can check out the show notes for a link to the Seed website to purchase, or on our podcast essentials page as well.
All right, on to the episode.
We have Katie back on. We're so excited. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, thank you.
So in this episode, we're really going to dive into the pieces of microdosing and how microdosing goes hand in hand with EMDR, or can go hand in hand with EMDR, and how that really can super speed the unblocking process.
Maybe I'll even pop in for a sec and kind of give my experience of how I even became interested in this, because I think that'll be helpful for the listener who has never even engaged in this to realize why I felt intentionally called to it specifically for a manifestation practice. So for me personally, growing up with a alcoholic mother, I have seen the research of how effective microdosing could be working with curbing addiction and having alternative models to simply AA. So I became really interested in it years and years ago, but hadn't really approached it. And fascinatingly enough, when I went to do my IVF transfer with Teddy, my doctor had asked, "Do you want a Valium?" I guess that's really common for people who do it because the research shows that it's very effective the calmer you are for the embryo to take, to attach. And so I said, sure. And as somebody who doesn't drink, who doesn't do literally I don't even eat sugar or caffeine. Like this is for me to say sure, because I wanted to see, effective results with that IVF transfer. I did it. And when I did it, I had never had Valium before. I had the most heart-opening, loving, beautiful experience. And to the point where I told Max, who's sober, who saw how was used to dealing with my shit, who saw how powerful that was. I was like, wow, I wish I had access to something like this that wasn't as powerful and overwhelming and as strong, that could help me heal resentments, could help me be in that heart space, get into my feminine, etc. So we tabled that. And then after I had Teddy, it was weird. I read this one postpartum article about a mother who had healed severe postpartum depression by microdosing. And just like the subtle effects that she was talking about, I was like, that's what I've been looking for. And of course, I had known the overarching research of how microdosing affects neuroplasticity and rewriting neural pathways. And so it all just sort of came together that a friend of mine I knew who had been microdosing had access to Paul Stamets' exact stacking formula. And so I ordered that, and it coincided right when I had met you, Katie. And on our first call assessing if we wanted to work together, you were like, I have tremendous experience in this. In fact, I'm going to this weekend, I'm going to like the Vegas conference on this, So not only was I looking for EMDR support, but also someone who could guide me through microdosing. And surprisingly enough, that stacking formula I was on was much too taxing for my body because of my adrenal issues. And as someone who doesn't use like any type of altering substance, i.e. caffeine, like anything, and there was cacao in that, we actually moved on to a formula that you work with, Katie, that has been tremendous for me. I mean, like tremendous. And so I can talk to my experience a little bit as we go through this episode to share with people that it is very gentle, so gentle that my dad, actually, when I was in my hometown last weekend, who's down for anything and just, a really good time guy, and his partner, one of their tenants on our ranch had asked, I have all of these nettles, do you want them? And I said, sure. Would you like a microdosing capsule? Like in exchange, I was like full on bartering here. And she was like, I don't do drugs. And so my dad's like, oh my God, my kid's on shrooms, And so they came to dinner that night and I had to explain it all to them. And I'm like, I'm going to give you guys some to see the experience. It's like less than a drink, what you feel on it. And so they both did it. And to their surprise, they were like, oh yeah, this is so gentle and et cetera. So I just want to share all of that for the listener who has no experience with this. And, as someone who is very conscious about how I interact with any type of medicine or healing modality, this isn't any exception to that. It's really powerful. So I just wanted to give that and now hand it over to you, Katie, because I have a gazillion questions as we go through.
Katie, can you maybe define for us, like, what is a microdose? What is the difference between a psilocybin microdose versus any other type of microdose? It's a buzzword now in the culture, it seems. So can you help define that for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So a microdose is taking a very small amount of a psychedelic compound. And like you said, we're going to talk about psilocybin today, but typically it can be LSD, it could even be MDMA, it could be various different hallucinogenics that is going to really give someone a subperceptual experience. And what I mean by that is It's very subtle. The person is not supposed to feel the microdose. The dose is 1/10 of a normal mind-altering psychedelic dose. So even though the effects are really subtle, they're still really effective and they're really positive. But by no means is the person going to trip out and start seeing tracers. The point of a microdose is a person can take it and they can actually go about their day and take their kids to school. They can go to the office and get work done. They're able to function and integrate into their daily routine.
I think that's a big sort of misconception, is that people think, oh, if you take this, you're going to feel inebriated in some shape or form. You're going to be staring at the clouds all day, daydreaming out into the ethers. What it's really doing is helping your brain process in a different way without having sort of that really intense idea that people get from a full trip.
Absolutely. And I get the fear. I get that, people don't want to take this pill of psilocybin and essentially, lose their mind, right? But that's not the point. The point is to really start low, really go slow. It will take a few times before a person finds their sweet spot. And so when you start out with the lowest dose, which is that 1/10 of a gram of a normal dose, you can eventually increase if needed, but you don't want to do it backwards, right? You don't want to start out doing a bunch and then having to taper back because you're like, that was a horrible experience. You want to avoid topping up. And what that means is if you take a small dose and you say to yourself, I didn't feel anything, you don't want to start taking more that same day in hopes to try to feel something. This is all very intentional. It's all very mindful. And there's a lot that goes into microdosing. And, I would love to share about kind of how to do it ethically, because this is kind of new to us. I mean, this is not new to the indigenous cultures. They've been microdosing, for centuries.
Yeah. And to that point, one of the things I was finding online too was like, indigenous tribes have been doing this for thousands of years, that they even found cave drawings of dancing mushrooms from 1000 to 500 BC. They had the mushroom stones of Mexico, dancing figures. And during the Bronze Age, they decorated mushroom-like images because they held them in such high regard for how they were using them as a medicinal property and a spiritual property. So people have been taking them for a very long time. It seems like every couple of years it comes back into the mainstream conversation, but plenty of indigenous tribes are currently taking them and have been taking them for thousands and thousands of years.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think what obviously I'm really interested in the neuroscience and the impact on the brain when it comes to most things anyways. But that's actually the piece that really sold me on microdosing, because I'm not someone who's ever taken any sort of psychedelic drugs before. It's just never called me. I've never really been interested. But I was learning from friends who had taken it, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be off on this, but they kind of described it that your default mode network, which basically has all of your defenses up. It's like the deep rooted patterns, maybe your limiting beliefs, like the strongest entrenched neural pathways are up. It lightens that a bit and brings that down so you can start to cross process over your brain. So you can start processing through thoughts and beliefs and maybe insert a new belief over a limiting belief. And now you're more open and receptive to it. And then you also will be maybe a little slightly less triggered or bothered by something that might really set you off before. So you're a bit more open to things. Does that ring true at all?
Yes, it rings so true. And it, in a sense, is cutting through to the subconscious. And it's allowing a person to see things from various perspectives that they were not able to access, before taking a psychedelic compound. It actually allows a person to feel more connected to themselves. There's this kind of release of judgment of who they are as a person. And the reason being is that there's this deeper connected to all things. And so I think a lot of people go through life feeling a bit lost and feeling there's like not a sense of belonging, right? It's wondering like, where do I fit into the world? And of course, the higher doses of psychedelics, which, I, on the other hand, Jessica, I have vast experience doing high doses of psychedelics. And I do have to say, it has absolutely changed my life for the better. It has expanded my consciousness tenfold in ways that I could never do just through meditation. It just really allows you to feel, and Lacy uses the word soft, right? It's gentle. It allows you to feel softer with yourself, and you do feel accepted and more connected because you're no longer adhering to those inner critic dialogues that you kind of play out on a daily basis that normally a person's governed by, based off their past experiences.
So what exactly, with the microdose, like, can you speak to kind of what's happening in the body, in the brain, or any insights around what's going on there?
Yeah. So it's interesting because we don't quite know. There's very little scientific data. However, there's a lot of clinical studies right now being conducted. And as this is gaining momentum and increased popularity, we're getting a lot of information. But, really back in the 60s and 70s, psychedelics, they became illegal. And the war on drugs really put a kibosh to any sort of scientific research for the therapeutic properties that it was demonstrating to have when they were performing those studies back, in that time. And so there's this real gap, right? There's this law between then and now. And what we are finding is that psychedelics, they primarily bind to the serotonin receptor, and the psychedelics act as an agonist. They're almost like performance enhancing. They're almost like a nootropic in a sense, a cognitive enhancer. The list honestly goes on, but some of the purports, and these are anecdotal purports. This is, all kind of collected from citizen research, which I think is absolutely the coolest thing ever, because people around the world in the hundreds of thousands are doing microdoses because they're seeing the positive benefits. And they're basically creating these like societies, these psychedelic societies, and they're coming together as a community and they're collecting their own research. And then they're giving it to scientists saying like, hey, there's something here, can you do a deeper dive into the studies? People say they feel more creative. They get their creative juices flowing. They feel more energized. They feel more motivated. They can drop into their flow state or get into the zone and concentrate on complex problems. And so, the list, it does go on, and I'll kind of bring in how it really complements EMDR because it allows a person to handle their trauma in a less intense way. A person can not feel as triggered when they think about their trauma past or experiences when on a microdose. And so it's very, very healing. That's the way I'll put it.
And then, what drew you to this tool to use in therapy modalities for patients or clients who were looking to go deeper in healing that trauma, like Lacy, someone who's always down to like go deeper and get to the root. And Lacy, you can speak to this as well too, but like, how do you know that is, okay, now this feels like the right tool for this person? And what specific blocks would someone maybe utilize this tool for? What sort of check marks do they need to cover in order to like utilize this tool to move through those specific blocks?
Yeah, so I would love to just share personally that I used psychedelics, of course, in, the younger years of my life recreationally, but I was a mess when I was younger and I was constantly anxious and I was insecure and, I had struggles with where I fit into the world. I'm the youngest of 5, and really it wasn't one of the stories where it's like, oh, you're the baby, you got spoiled. It was, I was the baby and I got completely overlooked. No blame to my parents. I absolutely love both of them and they did the best they could, but my dad was working, my mom was working, and it was more of a matter of like catch up and catch on or you're going to be left behind, little one. So there was just a lot of self-doubt and questioning. And as I started to become more intentional in my own psychedelic experiences, I really started to notice that I was able to love myself, and I was able to really drop into what self-love felt like. And it almost didn't matter what had happened to me before in my childhood. I was so grateful to be alive. I was so grateful to have experiences where I was connecting, communing with nature. There was like a sense of purpose I was all of a sudden developing. And I was noticing I was able to have deeper relationships. I was able to actually speak my truth and actually speak about my past in ways where I didn't feel shameful or, stricken with guilt. And so as I went through becoming a therapist, similar to Lacy, I'm a seeker of wellness. I want all of the things that could possibly make me healthy, because I really want all of my clients and just anybody to feel well. I really do. That is something that's like a mission of mine, to help people feel optimally well. And so we started to think, we as my husband and I, well, we're taking these high doses of psilocybin. Why not try a small dose? And then we kind of looked it up and saw that James Fadiman, he's kind of the pioneer of bringing microdoses to the forefront. He had this protocol. So we kind of followed suit and started making our own microdoses and followed his protocol. And then I thought to myself, well, this is very therapeutic. It's like if you're deficient in something, you go to a wellness practitioner and they say, oh, you need more vitamin D, or you go to a doctor, they run your labs and it's, oh, you're deficient. You're going to want to take, X, Y, and Z to, supplement what you're deficient in. And so I kind of look at therapy in that way. If we're deficient in self-love, or if we're deficient in some type of way, well, let's supplement it with doing that personal work. And this is just one of the things that we add, in conjunction with meditation, in conjunction with journaling, in conjunction with Lacy's work, all of the DI work and all of the EMDR I do with my clients. It's like, hey, let's do this too, so that you can sustain the long-term effects for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I'll even pop in from a manifestation standpoint of, everything and just my limited experience so far in this process. As we spoke about earlier in EMDR, I had practiced a bit before Katie, and then, revisiting it again with Katie, and now in truth, finding my right dose with Katie. I'll explain sort of the energetics I've come up upon, because it's been pretty revolutionary for me to combine it with this work. And so on the microdosing front, what I've found, especially now that I am on this dose that isn't taxing, and I am able to carry out and have the sweet spot. What I'm doing right now is 4 days on, 3 days off, to your suggestion, Katie. And I think I spent most of our last session explaining like how miraculous this is. I think that, and like a whole nother workshop downloaded. Poor Katie.
Wow.
I know.
It was beautiful.
She's like, okay, well, this is your time. So it's all good. But so I'll speak to the energetics that I've discovered so far. And I do want to talk about, I've seen that it's become really fashionable, manifestation and microdosing. I see some friends that are doing it with one particular company, and there's no real deep guidance there. So it's like, as someone who has been taking this dose and seeing what happens in the integration period, I feel like what I noticed from the microdosing piece itself so far, to my personal experience, is it helps reinforce the new neural pathways that we're overriding within EMDR, as well as the TBM, unblocking work. So I feel like there's the unblocking piece that we do together through DIs and EMDR. And then when I take the microdose, exactly as you spoke about, I feel like it overwrites the subconscious to put me into a state, a heart space state, that takes away my ego. So it takes away resentments, low self-worth, unworthy, unlovable, the things we're trying to unblock. So it helps remove those so that in that space of when I'm on the microdose, I can reinforce now the new neural pathways, that the new suggestions that we're overriding. So it really feels like it's tremendously speeding up the unblocking process through DI, EMDR, microdosing. But in addition, and this is huge, the microdosing, I feel like, is tapping me into unlimited amounts of expansion that I didn't know was possible. So beyond I feel in my heart space, and I'm not in anxiety, I'm not in ego. Beyond that, because I'm somebody who does this work and understands it, I'm also able to tap into my inner child because I've been addressing it. It's very fresh through unblocking and EMDR. And I'm able to bring that forward and now bring her into this expansive experience of limitless and possibility. And this is your truth, connectedness to everything. So I'll give a really good example of like a practice that I find so far has been working really well. So throughout the week after our work, I'll be doing the unblocking work. So I'll be doing the journaling and I'll look at what's triggering me this morning. I do it in the morning when Teddy's still asleep because I have like 2 hours next to her in bed. And I'll say like, what anxiety is coming up for me today? What triggers coming up for me? And that's what I work through. Kind of like you talked about, Jessica, like using that optimal time with your neural pathways that's so fresh that science shows that in between conscious, subconscious, sleepy phase. That's when I'm working with it. And that'll be a process of DIs, EMDR, et cetera, like unblocking. This is what I've found in my personal practice that makes it most powerful for me. And then I'm curious to hear about Katie's suggestion is I'll do all of that unblocking. So it'll be so fresh. My new overriding suggestions of my neural pathways will be so fresh after unblocking, bringing in the new positive statements like Katie and I work through. I'll have all of that done. Then I go on a walk every day. And when I go on that walk, I take the microdose and I instantly tap into the egoless, the heart space, etc., because, the microdose has taken effect. And then I'll bring forward all of that stuff I worked on and just look at it through this lens. And I know you touched on this a little bit, Katie, but this is where I'll let you pop in. Now that the subconscious is so primed, it's so open, how is that new suggestion through neural pathways happening a lot faster, like overriding those old neural pathways, because it continues working when I'm not taking the microdose on the 3 days off? So I'll let you pop in there, like what's happening in that moment when I am feeling so instantly like I'm unlocking all of these old blocks. And then with the microdose, now I have access to ultimate expansion and ultimate overriding. What's happening there?
Yeah, so it's like activating the good that resides inside. And so if we think about you laying new neural pathways and really installing positive statements, and then you microdose after that, it's going to get right to that new neural pathway, and it's going to amplify that. It's going to say, let's build on this experience. Let's allow you to really feel this experience. And the cool thing about microdoses in comparison to like a pharmaceutical medication is that pharmaceuticals treat the symptom, right? So if a person's feeling depressed, it's going to decrease that severity and frequency of the symptom of depression. So the pharmaceutical is doing its job, right? It's making a person be able to cope more effectively with feeling depressed. With microdoses, it's not only decreasing a person's symptoms of depression, but it's also increasing the positive effects of how a person's feeling. And so you're speaking to that, Lacy. You're saying, I'm doing this deep, deep work in the morning, and then I'm going out on a hike with my microdose, and I'm really feeling the intensity of, and when I say intensity, I don't want to mislead anybody. It's the intensity of the work, not of the microdose. remember, it's a very subtle effect of the microdose, but it's allowing whatever positive work you have started or created, it's allowing that to really grow into something that can become a lifestyle change.
And my other question, because I have so many, in the EMDR, like we talked about the 8 phases, and then we get into the actual EMDR phase at the end where we introduce the positive statement. What I've noticed is that's where the real integration is taking place. Let's just theorize, because we don't have true science on this at this moment, aside from like the tremendous super speeding of manifesting I'm doing right now. But if we were to theorize together, a positive statement has just taken place in the EMDR or even in DI, like somebody has access and they've had like a really healing experience and they feel like they've really, really helped to heal the emotion around one specific block. And then now they take the microdose right after that now, is opening up that space. So let's say they've really, really taken that trauma down significantly or healed it or, really gotten close to healing it. And then they take the microdose. What do you theorize is the magic in your brain that could be happening right at that moment to fast track the unblocking and expansion of, say, the thing the person picked up in their trauma was, I am unlovable, I am unworthy?
I think it's the integration process. I think they're making that whole experience that you just broke down whole. They're bringing it together. And so it is really kind of taking all of the pieces and allowing the person to create a new meaning out of the connections they've created. And so, when you take the insights and when you say the new positive belief and you install that and you take the microdose, you're bringing all of those elements together to kind of create your new future template in a sense. And you're in those moments all very susceptible. You're very wide open. And if you think about trauma, we close ourselves off to new ideas because that's a defense mechanism. It's a protective factor and it's there for a reason. But when you're doing the DIs and when you're doing the meditation and the EMDR and when you're taking the microdoses, you're actually allowing your brain and your body to be wide open for change. And I think, as you do them regularly and you trust in the process, you're making yourself a whole new person and a whole new person. And that whole new person is like your authentic self, right? That is the goal is, I'm able to be me. And I actually feel really okay about that.
Which is truly in this work, to be magnetic work, is the ultimate goal, to get back to your whole worthy, authentic self. Worthy meaning feeling really good about my authentic self. And I can say that is happening so fast for me. I mean, so fast, to the point, even our last session, I was like, damn, I feel good. I don't know what to break. I mean, obviously there's a plethora and the work continues, but I feel so good. And that was on 3rd day of integration. So no microdosing for 3 days. And it had lasted that far because so much is transforming in my brain so rapidly. So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have, and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
One thing that I'm also kind of hearing, and you guys describe this, is it sounds like the experience, and this is kind of getting into like the spiritual side of things here, but it sounds like the experience on the microdose really connects you to sort of that heart space source energy. It's like we call it the highest self, or I'm even thinking of other therapy modalities like internal family systems. They call it the self with the capital S, like that feeling of calm, confidence, inner connection with everything around you, with nature. That's like where you get your pings from, that's the infinite part of you. And so it sounds like if you are microdosing, that version of you is able to come forward in a way that if you're triggered, your protection modalities are up, your walls are up, all of the things that you've utilized to help you survive through previous traumas pops up. And so it sounds like when you microdose, that highest self is able to present even stronger. And as you're going through blocks, that higher self remains. Even if you go through a really triggering experience you're moving through in EMDR or in a DI, that highest self energy remains. And so you almost get to like reparent your inner child or heal your shadow parts from that higher self energy.
You nailed it, Jessica.
She always does.
Yeah.
Like on prior episodes of, these explained episodes, we're always like, damn, you're really good at deducing.
It's quite impressive. And, I want to speak a little bit to, I find myself being so much more introspective in regards to my relational awareness. And so I found myself talking in a certain tone to my husband and being like, catching myself in real time on the days I microdose and going, hey, I'm sorry, I did not need to say it that way. Or even just asking myself, am I being defensive? Like being a little bit more inquisitive of, am I projecting right there? Am I magnifying the situation? And so I just have less judgment towards my own characteristics that I'm not so fond about. There's not so much of that, like, there you go again, Katie, engaging in that behavior. It's okay. Let me look at that and I can, see it for what it is. And then I can correct it. And in the corrective moment, I'm meeting it with like peace and compassion. And what happens is there's no separation. There's no separation from myself. And then there's no separation from my partner. And so it's like we can like blitz through things, like certain problems super quickly because I'm able to just kind of call myself out and it's not a big deal. That's another thing is, and Lacy, tell me if you experience this, like the most annoying of coworkers is really not that annoying when you're on a microdose. And
well, that's what I shared with you even this last week is as somebody who grew up with tremendous coda, I really resonate with being a codependent. Resentments they like can plague me, and I'm really good at managing and existing, but to a fault, like it messes with me, I think on a health level, et cetera, to be exhausting this energy all the time. And that's one of the biggest pieces I notice mapping back to that experience on the volume of going like, wow, this is what it feels like to just feel love for everyone and people. I think the real root for me there is like resentments and triggers. And that's what I have been really noticing, that they are so minimal now doing this. And I'm, like you were just sharing, becoming extremely aware of my responses to them, reactions to them without judgment of myself. And that is so, so powerful. And it's funny because I was just, talking to the person we have in common who actually introduced us, Katie. And, she was reminding me she accidentally took a really big, I'm sure she shared this with you recently, but like took a gummy for pot. And I haven't had, I haven't smoked or anything in so long. So I forget that I remember that those experiences were like, you could really figure out your blocks and things so quickly. And it helped me discern a little bit where it was like, oh, wow, the difference between that, which is beautiful. Like my brother, I always encourage him. I'm like, do this work. And I say this with a huge disclaimer. For my brother, marijuana has been literally the most therapeutic thing for him on the planet with his trauma. Like with anxiety, etc., he cannot exist without it. And I'm a big proponent of people finding whatever they need. But I always tell him, I'm like, if you're going to do this work, do it with that. Like it's going to happen a lot faster for you, even though I'm somebody who doesn't smoke anymore. But anyways, I digress because what I got to notice was, oh yeah, that's the difference. What I'm seeing with psilocybin, it really, really just gets to the heart, literally the heart of you, and taking your ego out of the way, taking your shadow out of the way, allowing your triggers to be witnessed without judgment. And so that's why I think it's speeding up this process rapidly for me. And on top of that, it's allowing me this access to show my subconscious, to show my inner child expansion that before was just suggestion. Now the bridge of expansion and belief is so much shorter because of all of the love, lack of judgment to myself and others I'm feeling, awareness, heart-centered, no ego, that bridge that used to take a lot longer to expand and to really show, for lack of a better way to put it, my very insecure inner child longer, is actually much shorter.
Do you feel like when you are in that heart open space and you're able to sort of witness, back to Katie's example of having a annoying friend or coworker or whatever, someone that like always you're like, oh gosh, whatever it is. When you are in a non-heart open space, do you find that time you would look at that person and feel resentful, angry, it might kind of ruin your day, you're ruminating on it. And then when you're in the heart open space, you're like, wow, I see, okay, that seems like a difficult situation, but it's almost like you're not taking it personally anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to what you have to say from a therapist standpoint on this, Katie, because what I've been finding in my experience is this is allowing me access. I think it's the combination, of this work, EMDR, and the microdosing, but it's starting to allow me access where I'm healing trauma around a lot of things, where I have resentments against everything we're talking about. But what's fascinating that I'm starting to see in real time, this is literally as of the last couple of weeks, is that not only am I able to witness my role in things, though I have this type of awareness and I have for years, it's been forced in the past, it's more organic now. I'm starting to see things from the other person's perspective of how I may be very challenging. And that's really powerful.
Wow. I bet Max is like, this is amazing.
It hasn't totally translated to him yet. That's why I initially started working with Katie. We have work to do on that.
Our significant others are always the last to receive the benefits.
I know.
I heard this analogy from this neuroscience. His name is Mnesh Grin, and he says, taking a microdose is like shaking up a snow globe and then letting your thoughts reorganize and settle in a more helpful and harmonious way. And I really love that because, it just speaks to the breaking up the old patterning and making room for the new approaches and new behaviors. And so, yes, Lacy, it's allowing ourselves to take personal responsibility. And in that personal responsibility, that's really empowering because we get to say, okay, we're a part of this, like the coworker may be annoying to me, but I may be annoying to them. So let me take responsibility for my part and do my work so that I'm making sure that I'm showing up in my best self. I truly believe that all of this work is increasing a person's conscious intelligence. And bear with me, because this is an idea I was trying to form in Belize with my husband. We were just there recently. And if he hears this, he's going to totally laugh, because I was microdosing and I was noticing that I just was so much more conscious. I felt attuned to people. And so before a person could annoy me, I was feeling empathetic towards them. I was, noticing these other travelers, and I felt like some of them were distressed or they were anxious. And so instead of me taking on their anxiety and taking on whatever they were going through, I felt so much more aware and connected to other people I didn't even know. And I was like, that is true intelligence. When you are operating from a place of pure consciousness and you can stay in that pure consciousness and you're not going to let the subconscious hijack you like it loves to do, you are operating in a frequency where I kind of feel like you're ahead, like one step ahead. And so I don't know if that really makes sense. And I want to continue to develop this idea of conscious intelligence, but I do believe that the purest form of intelligence isn't book smart. It's understanding how your thoughts, your behaviors, your own energetic frequency is going to impact the world and the people around you. So being, entirely responsible with, like, how do you want to be in the world? I want to be someone that's extremely loving and caring and helpful to all people I encounter. Okay, so if you just take a microdose and you go about your day and you're finding that you're not really experiencing the subtle benefits and you're going, this isn't for me, then that's totally fine. But the best way to do it is to start some type of journal, and your manifestation journal would be perfect, Lacy, for anyone that has that. To start tracking your mood before you even microdose. And so you just kind of want to simply log, like energy level, mood, and throughout the day, 3 times a day. You want to track your sleep. You want to track, how much caffeine you drink. You want to track your thoughts. And so kind of simple tracking. And then you'll do that about a week or so before you start your first microdose. And then you're going to track for 30 days. You stick to a protocol, and you can pick a protocol, and they vary depending on what feels comfortable to you. Because some protocols have you taking it 4 days on, 3 days off. And then some protocols will have you taking it every other day, or taking it 1 day and then 2 days off, and then 1 day and then 2 days off. So you pick a protocol, you stick to it for 30 days.
Can I ask you really quickly, Katie, just to interject?
Yeah.
What determines what type of protocol, out of curiosity?
It's entirely up to you.
Just basically what's working for you.
What kinds of protocols? What are even different options, or what does a stack even look like?
Yeah. So the Paul Stamets stack is the 4 days on, 3 days off. And then the Fadiman protocol, he has 1 day on, 2 days off. So you're microdosing 3 days a week with 2 days spaced in between. The reason the protocols are in place is because a tolerance can build up. And so this should be avoided. And so this is why you need those breaks. And in those breaks, Lacy said as much, she's still feeling in that integration process the effects. So it's not like you have this like experience on the days you microdose and then you have this kind of crash or withdrawal. There's no negative side effects to microdosing. There's no dependency that's built, and there's no getting physically ill or sick when you're not microdosing. But there is a tolerance that does get built up.
Meaning that you could then have to take more, and et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. So a person would find themselves, wanting to take more. But if you're doing that, then you're steering away from what microdosing is. And so you just kind of, you literally find what works for you. And you can find what works for you by picking a protocol, doing it for 30 days, and then seeing how that goes. For me, the only negative side effect I ever had was I drank coffee in the morning, took a microdose, and I hadn't had any food yet in my system. And I was like, oh, I am feeling awfully jittery. I do not like this feeling. And then I put two and two together and like went and ate something and then felt better. And then what I've slowly started to transition into is not drinking any caffeine on the days I microdose because I don't need to. It really sustains my energy throughout the whole day, which is fabulous. Way better for my adrenals. But so a person's going to want to like set intentions and ask themselves questions. What do I want to let go of? What do I want to bring into my life? What do I want to do more of? What would I like to transform? Those are some really important questions to ask. How do I want to feel today? I think a lot of people start their day feeling pretty good, and then things happen, and then that all of a sudden defines their mood. And if you start the day by defining your own mood, it doesn't matter then what happens to you after that, because you've made that intention that you're going to be really positive and present in your day. And so that can be really powerful as you're microdosing, is setting intentions. And then you really start to realize that you're becoming your own inner guru and shaman. You're able to really dictate and control your physiology, your psychology. So you just do this, and then you really see what transforms, because the more attention you put on your intention, your energy is going to go there. And the more you set intentions, the more transformation that's going to happen. Now, for the integration process, you're going to want to do some type of journaling again. You're going to do some type of meditation, some type of exercise and body movement. You're going to want to make sure to be conscious of what you're eating. And what's interesting is people who start microdosing who don't have the best diet will naturally gravitate towards healthier choices. So they'll be like, I usually eat burgers and pizza. I found myself ordering a salad. Weird. I don't know. It just seemed more appealing to me. But as they're more intentional with how they want to feel and what they want to let go of and what they want to create, that goes hand in hand with what you're putting in your body. And so it just kind of naturally allows a person to live a more healthier lifestyle by developing healthier habits while they're microdosing.
How important is input for the days of microdosing? I think about, how hypnotizable social media could be, for example. If we're microdosing and we happen to go on social media and are in this loop and maybe triggered by things, or maybe we're allowing our brain to just sort of ruminate on a negative belief, I can see someone thinking, oh no, is this making this negative belief more ingrained neural pathway? Like, what sort of bumper lanes do we need to have in place on days that people are microdosing?
That's such a great question, Jessica, because I always say to Lacy, after we do a session with EMDR, okay, you're cracked open, you're really susceptible. Be very mindful with who you talk to, what you say, because everything's very imprintable right now. Your neural pathways are going to continue to be laid. So I would definitely suggest to limit and monitor the amount you're going to spend on social media. As you start microdosing for some time, the social media downloads don't really impact you as much. You're just like, meh. And there's a less kind of inclination to go on social media. You're actually more inclined to go outside and sit and be sun-kissed by the sun or play with your dogs. Like, you want to be around things that are living. So there's a natural desire to kind of stray away from it. But I love that you brought that forward, because it's important to note that it's not going to lay neural pathways of jealousy or envy or anything negative, but it's not going to help what you can increase. And so it's just kind of like canceling out the positive effects that can occur.
Like how many benefits you could get out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask too is, so like when I was younger and I would take mushrooms, like really, really macro doses of mushrooms, sometimes I would have a bad trip. With microdosing, or maybe it's the specific, like, is it just psilocybin that is in the microdose? Why is it always a good experience?
Well, what's happening in the higher doses of psychedelics is one of the most important things is set and setting. Because it's such a minuscule amount of a microdose, the set and setting is not going to make or break your experience. And so it's very palpable. It allows a person to digest a small amount of psilocybin and use the medicine that it is in a productive manner. It's not going to cause that mind altering effect that can really scare a person. So there's really no scary aspect to microdose because it's, I love when you say gentle, Lacy, because it's so gentle. And so it's just not going to yield that sort of like, whoa, do I regret what I just did right now? And the minute you resist a psychedelic, it is going to cause you to feel freaked out. And so I think there's a natural surrendering that can happen when you microdose because it's like, oh, this is much easier. This isn't so scary. So I'll let go. Yeah, that feels good. I'm willing to let go.
It's funny. I find myself, and this is just in the last few weeks because prior to, of course, the other one was too taxing for my system with all of the different added, elements like the cacao, etc. So it's so funny how now I was just noticing in Teddy's room, it's definitely a hippie baby's room. Like there are so many mushrooms and things around. It's very, all the wood toys and stuff. And as someone who has loved mushrooms for so long in terms of I was a huge tonic drinker, et cetera, and still am, and, drink reishi every single day. I see now how like Woodstock and Topanga, like how people worship mushrooms.
Yeah.
It's starting to happen where I'm like, these are the most beautiful things on the planet. And I remember watching Paul Stamets' very first TED Talk of how it could literally, mushrooms, not just psilocybin, could heal the planet. And I remember even then being like, these are so special. But now like working with them in such a magical way, I am like, this is the greatest gift to the world. And I think it's me feeling in my heart for the first time.
Yeah.
I even am like texting friends that I know that microdose. I'm like, want to microdose and walk? Because it's like, we're going to be on the same like beautiful frequency. So just wanted to share that it's really been a beautiful experience.
Well, and I want to say the ethics of microdosing is so important. And there is such a deep, deep reverence and sacred nature to this medicine. And I do feel responsible to say that I don't condone or support the use of illegal substances. There's definitely some medical risks associated with taking these casually. And so we don't want anyone to just go out and blindly start taking psychedelics because this could amplify any pre-existing mental health conditions. And doing it intentionally, be responsible, make wise choices, do consider the law and ethics that go into, illegal substance use. Understand why you're wanting to take it before you take it. Work with somebody. Please be under the guidance of a therapist or a skilled, trained psychedelic advocate integrator. They exist. But because these medicines can yield such great benefits, do it right and get the most out of it. Don't go out there and give yourself a bad trip just because you're curious.
I agree. And it's something we always say too at TBM, even with the work we do. I mean, if just get the support is so important to facilitate it as peacefully as possible to actually integrate it.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best way for someone who, after listening to this episode, where can someone go to start connecting with like an EMDR therapist and using that modality? And where would you point someone who's like, wow, I would love to try microdosing. I'd like to learn more about it, maybe find a practitioner. I know especially in the US, there's so many trials and studies going on right now that, therapists are using that as a tool alongside of those studies. Where would you point someone for next steps with either of these modalities?
Work with Katie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, KatieLaRue.com, Katie_LaRue_OHC on Instagram. But MAPS is a great starting point. They're a multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies. And so they're conducting a lot of studies with MDMA, ketamine, psilocybin, and LSD. And someone could go on there and find a team to work with, actually. There'll be a medical doctor, there'll be an integrator, a nurse, and a therapist. And I don't know what it looks like right now. I know there was a long waiting list. A lot of people are moving in this direction because they're seeking a more holistic, natural remedy because they've tried everything else.
The allopathic route, which again, if that's working for somebody, like highly support that as well.
I agree too. No knocking that at all. So MAPS is a good starting point. There is the EMDR Institute, and that would be finding an EMDR provider in California. So that's like the emdrinstitute.com. I hate to say this, and this is not to discourage anybody, but we're, in the midst of a mental health crisis, and it seems like a lot of people aren't available. So if you are, and I'm totally open to connect people, if you are not finding what you're looking for, you're welcome to contact me and I can help guide you in a direction to get you connected with somebody.
Wow, that's so helpful. Thank you so much, Katie. I mean, that's a huge resource for people because I could just see thinking of people all over the world being like, what the heck how do I find this? What do I do? I am also recognizing that I live in Los Angeles, so we tend to be a bit more on the holistic side, forefront of those things anyways. But if you're interested in different healing modalities, start talking to people around you. You might be surprised at who's already utilizing a different tool or treatment or who might know someone. The more I started asking questions about this, I realized almost all my friends were familiar with or taking or had gone to. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm late to this party. Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Everyone I know is basically up to this.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting and so cool to see what will happen over the next few years as people use this to really help with mental health issues, sorting through difficult situations and traumas that maybe they haven't been able to process through other modalities before.
Michael Pollan has a great book. It's How to Change Your Mind, What the New Science of Psychedelic Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and Transcendence. So that's another, like if you're not connecting with a service provider, but you're curious and you want to have a starting point, start with reading some literature. And he's a great author. So that's another resource to kind of utilize.
Absolutely. Do you have any other closing thoughts, Lacy or Katie?
I mean, the one I just want to close with is the stamp of approval I could give so far is that I'm so happy to continue finding the perfect resources that support manifestation because, the crux of manifestation in order to manifest, through the lens that we use is unblocking, expanding, and aligned action. And what we've covered in the EMDR episode, the microdosing, it's really, really playing into the unblocking and expanding and giving you the wherewithal and the tools to actually take aligned action. And so I think that it's really harmonious and beautiful to be covering these topics.
Absolutely. I think having more tools and resources to help people further unblock and then notice how easy they can connect with things on the other side through this process is going to be so powerful. So if you guys try out EMDR or microdosing, or you've done it before and had great effects with this, write into us, let us know. We're curious to see how your experiences were and how it impacted your manifestations.
And what about you, Katie? Any last thoughts?
Oh, that's all. Just be kind to each other. These are such trying times, and drop into a deep state of gratitude. I just keep sending prayers and love out into the world. And yeah, just really grateful for this experience. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you, Lacy. And this has been lovely. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you guys have a beautiful weekend, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.